Now that you have your mastheads created, it's time to start putting together the rest of your design. So putting together your cover lines and your secondary cover lines. And then finally, the last step would be to add the picture in the background. But as you're putting everything together, some of the main things to think about is the unity of your final magazine. And that's what's really going to make it something that is easy to look at. Having that unified color, text, and font throughout your title and your cover lines is really important, and it should all work together with your final image. So looking at my title here, I have the same purple color repeated down at the bottom. I also have the same light blue color that's behind the 101 repeated in the circle, and it's also the same color that's found on her shirt and pants. So it's important to try and unify the colors. Try to use no more than 3 colors. So you don't want to use colors that aren't going to work well together. So if I added maybe green, yellows, and pinks into this image as well, it would be a little bit too much to look at. So make sure that your final magazine has unity within it. Something else to think about is the font style that you're using for your secondary cover lines and your cover line. Even if you used a fancy font for your title or your masthead, you aren't necessarily going to want to repeat that throughout your image. So you want to try and keep it simple when it comes to the text of your of your cover lines and your main cover story. So keep it simple with the font that you're choosing. Some of the fonts that work really well is fonts that, again, don't have extra maybe curls or loops to them, just something simple such as maybe a Times New Roman. This one here would work pretty well. I used on mine Arial, which works as well. It's just a simple font that's not going to be too distracting. Because within a magazine, there is a lot that's going on. You have your titles, you have your cover lines, and if you're using different fonts and different colors, it's going to distract from your photo, which you still want to stand out within your image. Something else to think about with your text is making sure that it does stand out enough. So if I had a darker background behind this where it says how to find the right doctor, that might be a little bit difficult to read. So make sure that the color you choose makes it easy to see. Something else you might want to try that will add a little bit of dimension to it and make it stand out more is to add a drop shadow. So if you notice behind most of my cover lines here, I have a drop shadow added. And that really adds an extra effect, makes it look a little more three-dimensional and stands out. So to do that, I'm just clicking on my text, right-clicking, going to Effects, and then Drop Shadow. And from there, you can adjust and edit some of those settings. The next thing that's important as you're putting together your cover lines and secondary cover lines is the margin that goes around your magazine. Right now I have my margins hidden, but if I hit the W on my keyboard, you can see where all of these lines are, all of these guidelines for each of my boxes. And I tried to line up the text along this purple margin that goes around the outside. So you can see how I have both of these cover lines, how to find the right doctor for your child, all lined up at the same spot, that same line that my masthead is. And that just keeps it consistent. And then same thing with the left side. I have this 101 that lines up with the fall outfits to try. So that's something that you need to definitely keep in mind. So you don't want to have your text all over the place. Keep it in line, keep it neat so that it is easy to read and follow along with. Now we're going to get started actually putting your magazine covers together. So starting out, you should open up all 3 of your mastheads. I only have one right here. But what you would do to get started is just delete the 2 that you're not going to be working with. So if I had 2 at the bottom here, I would click and drag across to highlight them, and then just hit delete on your keyboard and it should get rid of your last 2 mastheads. Make sure that you add your date to your magazine. So I'm going to use my text tool here and add a date at the top. I'm going to make mine December and then 2017. And choose the font that you want for that, again by highlighting it and selecting at the top. I'm just going to use Arial to keep it simple, and then I'm going to change the size, make it a little bit bigger so it's legible, and I'm going to move it so that it fits right at the top here. You could also put your title at the bottom, either way is fine, or your date. And then the next thing I'm going to do is add my tagline. So my magazine is about parenting, so my tagline I'm going to add on a new layer. So I'm going to add a new layer, lock my masthead just so again that's not going anywhere. And then when I add this new layer, I'm going to make sure that I'm on it when I'm adding my text. I'm going to click and drag across. I want it to only go out to the margin. And then I'm going to type in my tagline, which again is like a slogan. So mine says, if I go back to my magazine, everything you need to know about raising a child. So I'm going to type that in. So now I finished typing that in and I adjusted the size and I made it fit so that it goes from one margin to the edge over here of where my masthead is, but you could also put this at the top, but just make sure you have your tagline somewhere. The next step is going to be to add your pictures. Based off of the practice that we did with the model that you added over the masthead, it's going to be exactly the same, so I'm going to skip that explanation on this tutorial, but if you need to, go back to the last tutorial for how to set up your layers, and make sure that if you have a way, have your picture go over your masthead, just like what we did with the model over the masthead. So now you should be at this point where you have your masthead and it fits together really nicely with your picture. Make sure that your picture, if I hit W, you can see that it's going all the way to the outside, so you want to stretch this to where your bleed is, so make sure that it fits all the way to the outside here. And then you should have, again, part of your picture covering up your masthead. The last step is going to be to start adding your barcode to the bottom right hand corner, so find the tutorial for that. And then there's also a tutorial for adding your cover lines and your secondary cover lines, so watch that as well before adding them. Keep in mind you want to make sure your magazine is unified, so if you need to change the colors of your masthead, that's an important step. So look at the colors that are used within the photo and try and use those same colors on your masthead. So for example, I have the same blues and purples that are found in this picture. You can use the eyedropper in this bottom left-hand corner to find colors. So if you click on a color, it will pull up that palette for you. So you can see this light blue that I used up here.